So that was my very quick, I usually do a very long lecture on all the dementias. So I didn't go through all of them, but I just want you to get a good understanding of what we're talking about, okay? Because some of these dementias are preventable, okay? We can prevent, obviously, nutritional metabolic issues. We just, don't drink in excess. We can prevent we know we can prevent heart disease. Well, the blood vessels don't stop at the neck. We can prevent heart disease, right? We can prevent strokes. And we know that 80 to 90% is the new number that they're giving of Alzheimer's disease can be prevented, which is pretty cool because there's many pathways to get Alzheimer's, right? There's a genetic pathway that's inevitable. Those people have presenilin 1 or 2 genes. There's a high-risk genetic variant called ApoE4. You're really high risk of getting Alzheimer's, but you may never get it with that gene. Then the rest of us might be getting it from really infection. Yes?
Can you be tested for that gene?
ApoE4, yes. Presenilin 1 and 2, yes. And there's very few families in the world that have presenilin 1 and 2. Your whole family in their 40s and 50s would have had this dementia. Yes, and when Alzheimer's identified the woman, LOE Alzheimer's, that had Alzheimer's, that's how we got the name Alzheimer's disease, she had presenilin, I want to say 2, but she had one of the dominant genes. So she was a dominant Alzheimer's patient. And so but the most common pathways to get Alzheimer's disease are nutritional. High carbohydrate diets, type 3 diabetes, we call it now, etc. And that's what I'm speaking about. Ways to prevent dementias that are lifestyle related. I am very well aware that there are genetic variants, but most of us, we're going to get Alzheimer's because of the way we eat, from lack of sun exposure, from lack of enough exercise, from pollution, from toxicity. So I want to prevent that. Okay. And obviously some are genetic, like Huntington's. So let's talk about prevention, and I know we're not going to prevent everything. The first thing I want to really you to think about is that we don't have one brain. We have two brains. We have an upper brain and we have a lower brain. The lower brain is the gut. The gut lining is everything from the esophagus all the way down, stomach, intestines, colon, all the way to the rectum. That lining holds neurons, brain cells. 400 to 600 million neurons. That's as many brain cells as your dog has. My stomach is just as smart as my dog, I let her know that. So remember that. Why is this so important? Because your gut will not only use neurotransmitters, it makes neurotransmitters. It is making your brain chemistry for you. We gotta treat it right. And not only that, we now know it can act independently of the upper brain and send signals, right? We get butterflies in our stomach, we get anxious. We get a gut feeling. We hate somebody's guts. We knew this, but now we really know this. So, all disease, including most forms of dementia, begin in the gut. If Parkinson's disease will begin 10 to 15 years in the gut before it ever runs into the upper brain, okay? And so we see biopsies of tau, etc., sometimes also in the gut and in muscle tissue before it gets to the brain. And they kind of look alike. Somebody says, yeah, they kind of are, they have convolutions and they look alike. Some people are saying parts of the unconscious are in the gut. There's a lot of studies, I don't know how you study that, but they're studying that. The gut will independently create hormones to create your eating behavior. You might be hungry not because you think you are, but because your gut is creating hunger hormones. That's why bariatric surgery works so well for some people. It cuts that part of the gut out. Weight gain can happen strictly from your gut bacteria. It will slow down or increase your metabolism. It will also build your muscle mass. Anxiety and memory loss can happen from gut health, problems with gut health. I ask all my patients, how's their gut? You'd be surprised how many people with irritable gut syndrome, irritable bowel syndrome, with constipation is a big one, always usually correlated later on with Parkinson's, etc. So it's really important to keep that gut going. The gut will produce 95% of serotonin. Serotonin is your happy chemical. That's how antidepressants work. They keep serotonin in your body usually, and they increase it. When you are in a diet and you lower your serotonin, you become hangry. You get hanger and you get anxiety. That's because your serotonin just dips. So sometimes you'll get hanger. 50% of dopamine. Dopamine is sort of your arousal. You'll get up and go. It controls movement. It controls the peristalsis, the movement of food through your gut. So 50% is produced in your gut as well. So that's how important is the gut. Some gut doctors are calling irritable bowel disease mental illness of the gut because it has too much serotonin. Now, the SSRIs, which are antidepressants, will adversely affect the gut because it's not letting the gut reuptake serotonin. And there are some studies suggesting it might be eventually associated with dementia. There's actually a long list of medicines that might eventually be, comorbid with it. The other thing you have to consider is that we're not alone, okay? We have a lot of bacteria, a lot. So I always think of that Charlie Brown character walking around with a little dirt cloud. For every human gene, so my DNA, like every neuron I have in my gut, every my own unique DNA, I have 250 to 800 bacterial DNA. There's more. I have more bacteria in me than I do me. That's fascinating. Now, the bacterial DNA is much smaller than human DNA, so it's about 3 pounds overall. They produce their own neurotransmitters. So not only are we producing serotonin and dopamine and a whole bunch of stuff, these gut bacteria, they can produce it too. So they can make us miserable or happy if they want to. That's fascinating. They synthesize the vitamins and amino acids, so oftentimes we're eating the food, it's not us processing it, it's our gut bacteria processing this food for us. So you probably have all heard, eat a lot of fiber, it's good for you. We don't eat fiber, we don't digest fiber, it's for our gut bacteria. It's good for them, and then they help us out. The bacteria degrade toxins as well. We're constantly eating things, or it's just in everything. We're eating other bacteria, we're eating toxins. So they help us with that. They help us clean out toxins. The 3 pounds of microbes you carry around with you might be more important than every single gene you carry around in your genome. That's a new line of thinking. Now, it's so important that they've begun doing, and I apologize before dinner to tell you this, but they've begun doing fecal transplants to treat brain disorders. So no one asked me to explain this. It's just what it sounds like. They will transplant fecal matter from one person to the other in order to inject healthy gut bacteria into them. And it's being used right now experimentally to treat Parkinson's, autism. Okay? There's a lot of research now in mice and rat. They're a little bit easier to do research on. So they did this one study, and actually there's so many studies, but I'll bombard you just going into personalities. But mice are like us, they have personalities. Some of us are shy and introverted. You could be shy and not introverted, and some of us are extroverted and exploratory. They kind of separated the mice based on their natural temperaments. And when they did fecal transplants, the exploratory mice who got the shy fecal matter, they became shy, and vice versa. Yeah, the shy mice who got the exploratory fecal matter became exploratory. So there's some thought that some of our personality is really our bacteria's personality. So just something to. Oh, and we inherit our bacteria from our mom and grandma and so forth. Because you all know you were not made in your mom's uterus the first time ever. You know that, right? You were made in your grandmother. Because your grandmother is the one that put the eggs inside your mom when your mom was being made. So you were made inside your grandmother. So your grandmother's nutrition is really what is mostly correlated with your longevity and your health. Not your mom, yeah. Yeah, everybody's like, oh, I never thought of that. We're born with all our eggs, right? Women are born with all our eggs. They were made inside our grandmother. Your mom's, okay, your mom's eggs were made inside her mom. So your maternal grandmother, that's when your X chromosome came from. One of your X chromosomes, you got two. Only his one X chromosome came from her. That makes sense, yeah. Now we're gonna get complicated. I think you're, no, yeah. Some of you are like, I shouldn't have drank that. Some of you are even drinking more now. So this is really simple. Basically, if we think that our gut bacteria is important, I was able to convince you of that, you can see how detrimental it is to eat things that will destroy it, right? This is just common sense now. So this is something called gut dysbiosis. We change this, meaning we alter the biome, the bacterial composition of our gut. That's really bad if we have good gut bacteria. When we have gut dysbiosis, we might have more of one bad bacteria, and the good one isn't there as much. So chemicals like herbicides are known to kill the microbes. And this is so controversial. I just pasted an article because people are like, Monsanto's isn't bad. They're like, okay, I'm just saying that the herbicides have been shown to be linked to killing the gut microbes. And so all I'm saying is people exposed to this are at really high risk for Parkinson's disease. We know one of the risk factors for Parkinson's disease is exposure to herbicides and pesticides. That's all I'm saying. So be aware when we eat that the food is nice and washed. Some foods we do better when they're organic, but not all foods. A lot of foods are resistant to having that toxic chemical in them. Usually if they have a thick leaf, like bananas don't need to be organic, avocados don't need to be organic. Yes?
Honey, I have one question.
Absolutely.
Like what you had said. We have two daughter-in-laws that have their daddies have died because what do you do with the people that are worried with the disease? I haven't heard that.
Okay, so my talk is geared towards prevention of dementia. But if you want to speak to me afterwards, we can talk about coping cells for people who already have the disease. Because you're absolutely right, it's so prevalent.
That's where we came, because I wanted to help my daughter.
Okay, yeah, and I apologize for the cross communication. I was told the talk was on prevention.
I'm so glad you did it, but I think some people maybe need to know. Too.
Absolutely. You know what? I bet you everyone in this room can think of someone they love who's had this disease. And I'll speak to you about that later, and I'll dedicate that time to you. I'm really sorry this isn't quite what you needed today.
Thank you for what you
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, thank you for pointing that out. So now some new studies are using probiotics, which increase the good bacteria, right? We all know this, probiotics. Some people are even going to probiotic spores, so it goes all the way through the intestines. They hatch in there. But anyway, they're using it in order to treat depression. Remember how important depression is to dementia, and anxiety. So this is a novel way to kind of treat it with probiotics, and some people do better with it. That's one alternative form. Magnesium is another, but there we go. Now we know that if you have happy gut bacteria, you're more likely to have a happy upper brain. So there's a huge correlation. Usually sick stomachs, you have a sick brain of some sort. Usually emotional functioning comes first. We're kind of emotional creatures. So when we can manipulate the gut bacteria, we can manipulate the brain. So it's a different way of doing it. So we're gonna go from down up, and then we're gonna go up down. We'll go in all directions trying to protect that upper brain. So avoid foods, I always start with the bad stuff. And nobody wants to hear this, but it's common sense. Avoid foods high in the glycemic index. Why? Because when our blood sugars goes high, our insulin goes high. When our insulin goes high, we are more likely to produce plaques and tangles in our brain. That's why Alzheimer's disease is also known as type 3 diabetes. There's a very common pathway to create Alzheimer's, which is a dysmetabolic syndrome. So we should be avoiding a lot of white potatoes, rice, pasta, white bread, and sugar, okay? Controlling blood glucose levels, having that blood sugar pretty low, under 100, as often as long as possible. is associated with decreased dementia and depression. For those of you who do an HbA1c, the magic number for dementia is 4.8. Under 4.8, you're very unlikely to develop a dysmetabolic Alzheimer's disease, which is a low number. That's a very low number. People who have chronically low blood sugars have the highest longevity and are the slowest to age. And that's why exercise is so good for you too, because it'll lower those sugars. Avoid cow's milk and cow's milk products because of the casein. Casein is inflammatory. Try to substitute vegetable milks, almond, coconut, cashew. And you should know that non-cow cheeses are lower in casein, like goat and sheep. They're not as bad for you. And then saturated fat is very controversial. Most of us metabolize it pretty well, okay? But the problem is we're eating with a lot of carbohydrates, and what we're creating in our system is not healthy. So we always say avoid the saturated fat. There is a subset of people that saturated fat does drive the dementia. And again, that's why genetics are so important. Again, ApoE4 people need to know that they have that gene. And everyone, all of us need to avoid the hydrogenated fats. I'm sorry, it's cut off. A hydrogenated fat is when you take an oil and you add a hydrogen atom to it. So that would be something like canola, very common, corn oil. So it just increases its shelf life, but it's really hazardous to our cardiovascular system. And it really makes us prone to stroking out. And I think most of us know that. Most of us know no longer to eat margarine. Go for the butter. It's way better than margarine. Most of us know not to fry canola, to medium heat fry with olive oil, and so forth. Now, I talked about the sugar because what a lot of my patients do is they realize, oh my goodness, I'm drinking too much Coca-Cola or Sprite or any soda with a lot of sugar in it. So they stop and then they substitute a diet soda. I want you to know that diet soda is just as bad for you. This study is really recent. I mean, just last year, April 2017. If you drink diet soda, it's almost a 3-time risk of developing Alzheimer's and stroke. And it's just one Diet Cola a day that it takes. Just avoid it if you can. Drink your water, drink a glass of wine, drink lots of water. But avoid. I know. And we as a society, we're so addicted to sodas, right? But there are carbonated things you can drink. You know? Club soda is an excellent idea. Tonic water. I think, there's one of them that has sugar. Is it tonic water? Yeah, not that one then. Yeah. Sorry. You guys tricked me. Okay. So what foods should we be eating? I got the bad stuff out of the way because I knew I don't make friends after that. It's okay. Antioxidant-rich foods. One of the ways we age is we oxidize, we rust, because we're so full of oxygen. So when we eat antioxidant-rich foods, all your fruits and your vegetables, darker colors better, we fight that. We fight that process. So everybody knows, oh, blueberries are full of antioxidants. Absolutely, look at the color. Kale, if you don't like kale, romaine. Things that have a lot of color in it. And darker is better usually. And a variety of color, you get more antioxidants. You get antioxidants from really funny things too, like salmon is really high in antioxidants. We forget. You usually think fruits and vegetables. Vitamin E foods, your sweet potatoes, your avocados, your almonds. Sweet potatoes are really low in the glycemic index. And now our local supermarkets are carrying purple sweet potatoes. So that's really exciting. That's one of the main things of the Okinawa diet, where the individuals who lived to be over 100 in Japan, they were eating like 60% of their diet was purple sweet potatoes. Yeah, it's because they're so high in resistant starch that the gut does not really digest it, but it feeds the bacteria in the colon, that resistant starch, and it creates a short chain fatty acid because our brain loves fat. And that's why it's so good for the brain. There you go. It's not because we think it's got so much carbs. We don't really digest it. Omega-3 fatty acids, wild salmon and walnuts, really good for your brain. Okay. Salmon being better because it has what we really use, which is DHA. Coffee. Whoever drinks coffee in the mornings, congratulations. It is associated with cognitive decline in stroke, decline in Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's disease. Yes. What do you want to put in your coffee? You could drink it. You can put butter in your coffee if you want, no worries. That's a ketogenic coffee. If you could tolerate it, my gut doesn't tolerate. But yeah, you're right. Some people, I put almond milk in the morning, but I put real almond milk. Almonds and water. The container says almonds and water. It doesn't say blah blah blah, sugar, saka gum, and blah blah blah. I don't even know half the things it has in it. So mine says almond and water. Publix, Elmhurst, and I get it unsweet. But I put that. You really do have to aerate it. I have one of those because if not, it clumps. It looks weird. But that's what I like. Some people like coconut milk. You know, so yeah, whatever you like. Coconut oil, you have to blend it. So, yeah, some things you have to blend because they're so like common. You have to blend it. Yeah. So coffee. So that's one good news. You guys like me again, right? If you like coffee. Now, alcohol, I was already asked about. Don't worry about it. A little bit is good for you. In fact, most people who live to be over 100 have drunk alcohol in moderation most of their life. Okay. So and I get to interview. I'm so blessed. I get to interview thousands of people a year. Those that live to be in their 90s. Usually tell me they have a glass of wine a night, so you're good. I've confirmed it clinically as well. So if you drink too much though, you're gonna get something called a thiamine deficiency. Thiamine is just vitamin B1, that's all it is. And you get something called Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. Wernicke-Korsakoff's to different doctors that name this. On the Wernicke phase, the person becomes really loopy, almost psychiatric, delirious, confabulatory. And once the alcohol is no longer in the system, depends on the person, a few weeks, a few months later, and they're no longer drinking, they just have Korsakoff syndrome. They're just very forgetful, amnestic people. It looks like Alzheimer's, but they just stay forgetful forever and nothing really progresses as long as they don't drink again. Hepatic encephalopathy, super fancy word. Liver is sick, and liver is making the brain sick. The ammonia levels and manganese will enter the brain and make you really toxic. It will have some residual effects, but as long as the alcohol is clear, usually a person gets back to normal. And delirium tremens is super serious, actually. So a person has been drinking for 20, 30, 40 years heavily. Someone says you can't drink anymore, they go into seizures. And that can cause scarring in the brain. That can cause encephalomalacia, scarring in the brain from the alcohol withdrawal. So if somebody's a heavy drinker, they have to be medically supervised as they get tapered off. They give them Valium and things like that to regulate the chemicals so the person doesn't go into a seizure. Delirium tremens can kill you. So what does moderation mean? Well, we've measured it. There's a dosage for everything. For most of us, and we're all different. If you're extremely tall and you got good, you might be able to get away with more. If you're extremely short, you're gonna get away with less. But the average human, about 5 drinks a week, not all at once. I get asked that question too. Don't save everything for Saturday. So 1, 2 at most a day, every day or every other day would be ideal. Okay? But about 5, give or take a week. What is so special about alcohol? 2 things: resveratrol, which is an antioxidant, and they do sell resveratrol as an antioxidant. They sell that. But I'm really a believer that everything should be bioavailable and you should eat the real food whenever possible. Why have an excess of resveratrol? And what's wrong with drinking a glass of wine? It also thins your blood, which when you have thinner blood, you will release acetylcholine, which is a memory chemical, okay? So that's why some of us are on aspirin and things like that to thin out our bloods. Turmeric will thin out your bloods, omega-3 will thin out your bloods. It's a good thing to have thinner blood, but not too thin.